everybody. We are back from the dog classroom. Episode 2, yes. So it's Anne-Marie and Miss Amelia. And what we are going to talk about today is leash training. So
more specifically, what we expect of our dogs.
Expectations and walking on leash training.
Yes.
I think ideally, whether you live in the country or whether you live in the city, the leash is needed because there are bylaws that say in the city your dog needs to walk on leash. So I know for some of us that live in different areas or different lifestyles that it still helps because then your dog's comfortable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought we would start with talking about puppies and leash training. And then I think we're going to go into like rescues who are maybe adolescent, a little bit older, and then senior dogs as well. I think that's sort of the thought process where we had. So
I'm sure we'll get off track, but
yeah, we'll do our best. We ideally could talk about leash training for hours.
Absolutely.
So we're going to try to
rein it in.
Mainstream. So when we teach our puppy school, I find a lot. So Amelia and I are the main ones that teach our puppy school. So we're talking about puppies under 14 weeks.
Yes.
Right? All
Babies.
Different breeds, large, small. It's such a new thing, and dogs aren't bred to walk perfectly and heel, and they're not bred to not pull.
Right.
Right.
And what is pulling?
Right.
Walking faster. Dogs have 4 legs. We have 2.
Yeah. And usually we say that's the main reason dogs pull is they have a faster gait. So a lot of our training is we're training them to slow down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Asking them to walk at human pace rather than dog pace. However, with puppies, what I've found a lot in my puppy classes is that the puppies don't want to walk. They don't have any value for it.
No,
and they just
don't.
stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they got to take everything in. So I think with puppies, the first thing that I usually say in puppy class is like, first, has your dog worn a harness and a leash before?
Yes.
Because if they haven't, then that's weird, right? Like you're asking them to wear something and they've never worn something before, and you're attaching them to you, and like probably a lot of people will be pulling on them. So there's this tension and they're being, dragged in a direction that they don't necessarily want to go.
Well, no, the puppies just want to do their thing and not necessarily follow the owner.
So I think before even teaching them about walking is like getting them to enjoy walking and getting them to have some sort of value for walking.
Value for walking with you as well.
Yes.
Building the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because to me, walking with your dogs isn't putting your earphones on and going for half an hour. To me, it's a bonding social experience. I chit chat with them, talk about the weather. Yeah.
Actually, last night I was going for a walk and I was singing to Stark while I was walking.
Interesting.
Made up little songs about how he was such a good boy, and I thought about putting my headphones in, and I was like, you know what? Like this is my 30 minutes a day of just individual time with my one dog, because we have multiple dogs, right? So it's important that they get individual walks, and that they get that one-on-one time with us, and that our expectations are we're seeing that as a bonding experience and a walk together, rather than I think what a lot of us had in our heads from previous ideas about dogs is you walk the dog, like it's something you do to the dog,
not with the dog.
Yes. Whereas I think we go with the dog and we check in with them, and so I think for me, I'm also talking to them and singing to them, and I'm interacting with them. Maybe I'm giving them a free treat just for fun.
Yeah. So everything Amelia's saying, I would say would totally apply to not only dogs that have already been trained, but going back to puppies.
Yes.
Because you just don't want to turn it into the puppy wants to go one way, but you want to go the other way. Yeah. So there has to be some compromise. The thing is teaching them that it's enjoyable, because usually once they're 6 to 7 months, I find they're more interested in smells.
Yeah.
They're more interested in exercise and going places. So usually they have better walking, or they're more cooperative, possibly, but you lack the attention because they're more distracted by smells. So at least with puppies, you have the attention, and it should be sort of a fun thing. So first exercise we work on, honestly, is just getting them used to the harness, collar, leash, and just having them walk with us. It doesn't have to be in a straight line. It's more fun when it's all over the place.
Zigzags and circles.
Yep.
And like, I think too, and I know I've heard you say this a bunch of times, is we like a loop. We need to walk, humans need to walk around the block.
Yes.
If we go to the lake and we go to the trail around the lake, we need to finish that loop. It's so hard for humans to go, okay, maybe my dog doesn't want to walk in this straight line. Maybe my dog wants to do, walk for 15 minutes and then change directions and come back. It's still going to be a half an hour walk. It's just not the route that you had in your head, because to them, what's the value in going in a line? Right? It's more about like, where's the smells and where are the things that they want to see. So I think too, like there are people who like to go for walks for their own physical health and mental health.
But I would say at that point, bringing a puppy for those walks.
You don't bring the puppy.
You don't bring the puppy.
Or you carry the puppy, or you put them in a stroller. Or...
I get entertained by the stroller puppy thing, but
they just physically can't, which is another thing that I think people don't consider, is they go, okay, I got a puppy, and I also have, a 2-year-old lab or some, high energy breed. And they're like, well, the lab needs a walk, so I'm bringing the puppy. And your lab can walk for, 2 hours if you want them to. And
but the puppy's not going.
Your puppy can't do that. So that's not really fair. And then the other thing that comes to my mind when I say that as well, going off topic a little bit, is then they don't learn to walk by themselves.
Yes.
With puppies.
Multi-dog household. Yep.
A lot of people will always
just walk them together.
And then they become so dependent on each other.
So what's happening is the puppy is looking to the older dog for reassurance or skills, and there's no independence. So it is suggested that you bring each dog out separately, because you want the dogs to look to the owner for guidance instead of possibly the other dog. Because remember, is if the other dog has a few quirks, barking, pulling, that puppy is learning from that other dog. Yeah. And you want them ideally to follow with you. And then everybody looks at me and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to work, this and that. We're talking about like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Puppies don't need an hour a day of walking. No. They can't.
They rather wrestle in the backyard.
Yeah. And mental stimulation too. Like people forget about mental stimulation, not just with puppies, but even with older dogs. Like if you're taking your dog and you are going on, a 10K jog every day, you're creating an athlete. You're getting a dog that's in really good physical shape.
So then you have to do that every day.
So if that's not something that you can maintain, right, is I suggest having days off. Like I don't walk on a leash every single day. I don't, sometimes we do other things. Sometimes we play games in the house. Sometimes we do agility in the backyard. But anyway, a little bit off topic. Coming back to our expectations for puppies on walks is the other thing I think a lot of people forget is you can bring treats with you to start rewarding stuff when they're little.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if you've never fed your dog anything outside of the house, they think that, training only happens inside. And then we get people who go, okay, my dog listens so perfectly at home, and then they can't do it anywhere else. So I actually recommend that puppy owners will take some of their dog's dinner, or even just like a cheese string or something, and just feed them on the walk. Like feed them for being near you, throw some treats in the grass and get them to search, just to start building that idea that, hey, we can actually work together outside of the house.
Because what we're saying is a lot of people, yes, the dog can do it at home. Most of us who get dogs want to take them places. Yeah. And we just assume they're going to be perfectly fine because we're forgetting about the environment, right? So bring the treats, get them to follow you.
Bring a toy.
Bring a toy.
How many dogs can play tug outside of their house, right?
Get the odd sit. But remember also build on it.
Yes.
Right? Start in the neighborhood. I always tell people, train it inside, backyard, front yard.
Yep.
Go for a walk, then add.
Yes. Going
to different places. Don't take puppy from inside to the marina on a Saturday afternoon.
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
And with puppies, the other thing to consider, and I think with all dogs, is the length of the leash. Whereas in my mind, it doesn't have to be only walk on a 4 or a 6 foot leash, because when we give them a little bit more freedom, then they're less likely to pull. right? So they have a longer leash, and therefore they can move a little bit more naturally, and they're not necessarily just running at the end of this leash. If we have a 4-foot leash, of course, it's always going to be tight.
Right. But the thing is, then we're working on recall. We're working on calling them in to heel and so forth. One thing, though, again, perspective-wise, to take into play is if you're in a field, yes, go for the long line. Okay. But again, if you're in the marina on a Saturday afternoon, it's not ideal to have the dog on a long line just because there's a lot going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's situations, right? I'm talking like you're standing in your front yard with your puppy trying to socialize them and trying to get them used to being on a leash. And you're walking back and forth and teaching them to follow you.
There we go.
It doesn't necessarily have to be like this short, tight leash, because then they're never learning what a loose leash feels like.
Yeah.
And I think part of what we teach as trainers and in our classes is loose leash walking.
Yeah.
So if they never get to feel what that is, then it's going to be a lot harder.
Okay.
Especially with like the flexi leashes, the extendable leashes.
Okay.
Like we talked about, is there isn't a loose leash there. So it's hard.
No, because they're always at the end of it.
Exactly.
Right. And it's something else to hold on to. So which reverts me back to, not only are we working with puppies to follow owners and have a good association with going places, we're also trying to teach owners how to, gently hold that leash, right?
Without tensing up on
to
it.
gently hold the leash, enjoy the walk, being able to treat at the same time. Because when our body language is calmer, and I want to say more efficient, so is starting to build our walking skills, right?
Yeah.
With the dog.
Because if we're just focused on, I need to pull in the leash and have my dog in heel, and they can't possibly sniff or move or anything, then we're not going to be very effective at training them either.
No,
because we're
so
just pulling them back.
Where we take the walking scenario for me, and I think in all you guys and what we do with all the trainers as far as teaching them, is we want the dog to learn
Yes.
where to be and how to be there, instead of the owner physically keeping them there. Because then we have puppies that go from 20 pounds to 120 pounds, or we have puppies that go from 2 pounds to 10 pounds.
Yeah.
So we want to teach the dog where they need to be and how to efficiently be there. But like I said, it's a joint effort.
Yeah, and I think going off of that as to where they need to be, there is no law that says your dog has to be in heel. I know that for a fact. If that's a law, I don't know. But I've had clients that are so surprised when they see that my dog walks like 2 steps ahead of me. And they're like, well, what do you do when they get out of heel? And I'm like, I didn't ask for heel. If I asked for it, sure. And I will, like if I'm, crossing a bridge and there's somebody coming by, or if, there's another dog coming and it seems like, I don't want them to interact or whatever, I will absolutely teach my dogs what does heel mean and how to be in that position. But when I'm just going for a walk with my dog, I don't need them to be in heel.
But it's for the whole walk.
For the whole walk.
For the whole walk. And I think it's a little bit, I don't want to say old school, but in the past, that's what our expectations were, where the dog had to walk totally beside us. And written 2 articles now for the newsletter about different types of walking. And that's exactly what Amelia's talking about, is some walks we go on a longer line, we do some scent work, we do some recalls. Other walks we're doing more training, like I do a lot of spins, sits, downs, all that in heel, trick training. Other times I always have to say parkour because Alfie's on everything. But to me, it's never just walking the same way every single day.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think I'm pretty much the same, and because all of our dogs are different too, right? So when I take Nuggie for a walk, if I try to just walk in a straight line, Nuggie's my little chihuahua, if I just try to go for a walk around the block, she's just so slow, and she just doesn't enjoy it. So she'll literally walk like behind me in my feet, and to me that's not fun. Like maybe people see that and go, oh, wow, like she's so well trained, she's walking in your feet. But to me, she's not having fun. So when we go out, and I guess when we are off leash in the bush, she's also in my feet a lot of the time. But she can go and explore a little bit and then come back, and then go and explore a little bit and come back. And when I say go and explore a little bit, I don't mean run off for several minutes at a time. I mean, she goes like 10 feet away from me, which is another expectation, I think, of leash walk, or not necessarily leash walking, but of walking that people have, is that the dog can do it on and off leash when, like you said, they've been holding the dog there. They haven't taught the dog where to be.
Yes.
So I think that's why the way that we train it, using, the reinforcing in sort of our little bubble around us and making sure they know this is where all the good stuff comes from, that teaches them it doesn't matter. The leash isn't relevant in our training.
No, because if they can heal without the leash, they can heal with it.
Exactly.
Yes. So you're teaching them skills. I also practice walking, like talking about the driveway again. When we're out just doing pee or going down the driveway, right away the dogs come in, walk beside me, get their cookies, we practice healing, let them go again, sort of back and forth.
So what about your expectations? Like in the area where we live, we have a lot of dogs who come in as older dogs from these communities where there weren't leash bylaws and where they were not, maybe they weren't even owned. Maybe they were sort of a stray or a wild dog, and then they become pets, right? Someone adopts them in, not to say we live in a big city, but it's a city. And so then the dog is expected to suddenly be on leash. And I think, I'm curious what you think about people's expectations when they get a rescue dog. I know I got an older rescue dog when I got Holly, and she had already had some leash work before, but she was mostly off leash, and so I think the expectation should be a little different to start.
Basically, what I try to tell people, and a lot of times, whether those dogs start right in classes, I think a lot of times I'm doing a private walking training session, to be honest, to help them out, to really talk to the owner and explain it. But if they go from running at large all the time, not having to listen to anybody, and then we put the leash on, then we start walking in our neighborhood with the traffic, and it's like overload.
Yeah.
Because not only are we talking about leash training, we're talking about socialization, we're talking about stimulation. So it's honestly about people that live in the country moving into the city, or vice versa, for sure. And I tell people that they need to go back to, like, even though the dog is a full dog, 80 pounds, they need to go back and realize their skills of walking are like an 8-week-old puppy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
their skills are walking, are being on the leash, even though this dog is full grown.
Yeah, and they also, like, going back to the puppies, they don't have value for going for a walk with a person, right? No. They have value for running around and scavenging for food, or doing what dogs do is they run around, they play with each other, they go and they sleep somewhere else. And if you think of that, and then you think of, okay, let's attach a leash to that dog, and then you bring them into town and you try to go for a walk, if they lay down, people are like, why is the dog laying down? What's wrong? And it's like, well, that's what they've done. Yeah. They've gone and they've laid down somewhere. Or why is that dog trying to get to the other dog? Or just things that we don't even consider, that they might have a year or more of history, depending on their age, of doing. Yeah. And now we're saying those things are suddenly unacceptable. And so we have to teach them those expectations.
So what we're asking is, again, start in a quiet place, the house, backyard, get them used to the leash, rewarding, and then slowly start to move. I'm impressed. I've had a few clients lately get some rescue dogs, and they told me they go up and down the street. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Good.
After 3 weeks, they added a block, because what they're working on is getting the dog comfortable. They got attention, so they added a little bit more. So quite impressed. The other thing there are nice tools out there to help with the pulling. So look at the tools as assistance for training the walking that you would like.
Right.
And then eventually we can look at weeding out the tools. And I'm pretty sure we'll be doing a podcast talking about tools. So we can definitely get into that more. But I guess what we're trying to say is leash training is relatively the same no matter the age of the dog. Right? Depending upon the experience level is basically what we're saying. So even with older dogs, my aunt and uncle in particular love them to death. He's 15 years old now, and you know what? There isn't much value for walking anymore because he hurts and he's sore. So he does his little jaunt around the neighborhood, but he loves to be social. So I told him, put him in the car, go visit people.
Yeah, and that's like a new trend I've seen online too, is car socialization, even for puppies, is just putting them in the car and sitting there with, you know, the hatch open and sitting with your puppy and letting them watch the world.
Yeah.
And I think, without going too much off topic, is that's a good way to get puppies used to different locations, because
Sounds,
your walk shouldn't
smells.
be in the same location every single time.
Yeah.
It's not very fun for the dog.
Yeah. But I think for any age of dog, new sounds, new smells, right?
Yeah. And those are all
huge.
part of socialization that sometimes gets missed, which maybe we do an episode on that.
We should be writing
socializing
this
to things. No, write it down.
Yeah.
Socializing to things that are not dogs and people, because that gets missed a lot of the time.
So just to get near the conclusion here for the leash walking, we just want people to take the time, look at it as a training opportunity.
And something you do with your dog, not to your dog.
Yes.
That I think is important, is you walk with your dog. It's not like, you know, I need to march the dog and heel down the sidewalk anymore. That's old hat.
But it's a huge learning opportunity for dogs that have not had the experience, and they need the patience.
Yeah. One more thing I think we didn't necessarily touch on is the physical exercise aspect of it.
Yes.
Because we do live in a city where there are leash laws, and there's not a lot of opportunities for them to get exercise off leash. So a lot of people rely on leash walks to be exercise for their dog. However, I know certainly with my dogs, if they get exercise in the yard or running around before we go on leash, they're much better behaved when they are on the leash. So what suggestions would you have for somebody who maybe doesn't have a fenced yard, or their only way to exercise the dog is to do it on a leash? Adding different types of training, because you're adding the mental stimulation component, right? Like I said, spin, sits, downs, do run, walk. Yes.
Yeah.
Take up running.
Yeah. Take up running.
Yeah.
Biking. What's the
biking's
thingamajiggy that you attach?
You can like attach them to the bike, which also you should probably train and not
Yes.
just do.
Yes.
Otherwise you'll go flying.
I would say my go-to is possibly a long line.
Yeah.
Swimming this time of year.
Swimming is great.
But with the long line is you're working recall, and you're having them run twice as much as what you're walking.
Yeah. And I think long lines do have a place, like even just with leash walking, because I'm not talking like a 50-foot, right? I'm talking like 10 feet, 12 feet, probably shorter than the extendable leashes that people have anyway, because it's just more control. Like if you do need to suddenly grab the leash, you can put your hands on it, whereas with the ones that are like the tape, you can't really grab that. Yeah. And then also, like, for giving them more room to walk around, you're not having to like reel it in every time with the handle. Like, you can just sort of reel it in and hold on to it if they do come closer to you.
Yeah.
So I think long lines do have a place, just, you know, within reason, and being respectful of other people's space and their properties and everything. Because it can give them more exercise going back and forth, and that might be a better option than, say, having your dog in heel and trying to walk for an hour, and then your dog comes home and they're not exercised at all. Because
so again, what we're talking about is just different types of walks. Yeah.
And I think you did a good newsletter, which I think is on our blog on the website, which was training walks. There was training walks, there was sniffing walks, and there was something else that I can't remember off the top of my head now. But it was a good little sort of overview of just different things that you can do on walks. Like sniffing is super important for them to do.
Because it's good mental stimulation. I think what I was trying to say is not only are we worried about exercise, but also mental stimulation.
Oh, I think it was exercise walk was the other one because it was off leash, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think with the sniffing component, like when my dogs are sniffing when we're walking, they're walking slower. So it's nicer for me because then they're not pulling, right? So I let my dog sniff the entire walk. As long as the leash isn't tight, they can sniff to their heart's content. And I think it's important that they do that. I also saw a good little meme online, and it was basically like the person standing there checking their phone and the dog standing there sniffing the grass. And they're saying it's basically the same thing. Like, you're all checking your messages, you're checking your email. And it was just interesting to see the comparison. I thought, like, we can just sit there and stare at a flat screen for hours and hours and scroll. And then we go, why are you sniffing that blade of grass for 30 seconds? Right?
Isn't that an interesting comparison?
It is.
I think a lot of times we can compare different behaviors dogs do to people, but it's about, again, taking the step back and having the aha moment.
Yeah,
really
so
be stuck with that.
Maybe as like a little summary, a little conclusion, like you said, we always, no matter the age or the size or whatever of the dog, we want to make sure that they're comfortable with the leash and the harness that they're wearing.
Yep.
We want to make sure that they understand that going for a walk can be fun. They find a value in it. They think that's something that's a nice opportunity to sort of bond with their person and to go
fun for you too as the owner.
Yeah, I think it should be enjoyable for the owner.
Yeah.
And you can do you can walk on leash, you can walk off leash where it's allowed. You can use a long line using some discretion, and just keeping your expectations that it's supposed to be an activity for you and your dog to do together.
Perfect.
I think that would be my takeaway.
Yep.
Any
Sounds
thoughts?
great. No, I think you summarized it extremely well.
All right. Well, then I think that's all for episode 2.
Yes.
And we'll finish up and we'll see you again for episode 3.